So we are now live on Facebook, so just everyone prepare. And we will be recording this present session as well. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for this important conversation. My name is Thomas Varela. I serve as the Director of Advocacy and Communications for the Urban League of Philadelphia. Just some quick housekeeping before we begin. We are recording the session. In addition, we are also going to be on Facebook Live. So if you are on the Urban League of Philadelphia's Facebook Live feed, please help us in sharing this with your network. I also want to thank our promotional partners that helped to bring this event to fruition: the Road Chapter, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, the NAACP Pennsylvania State Conference, Pennsylvania Youth Vote, the National Coalition of 100 Black Women, and Pennsylvania Chapter, and the National Pan-Atlantic Council Southeastern Pennsylvania Region. Today, we are excited to have Councilmember Derek Green join President CEO Andrea Custis for this important conversation. To quickly introduce Derek Green, in 2015, Councilmember Green won the Democratic primary for City Council at large in Philadelphia by receiving the highest number of votes cast in the election, and he was elected as a member of City Council. In 2019, he was elected to another term. As a member of City Council, Councilmember Green chairs the Committees on Finance and Disabilities and serves as the Vice Chair of the Committees on Aging and Law and Government. Additionally, he serves as the Chair of the Philadelphia Gas Commission, President of the Pennsylvania Municipal League, President of the Democratic Municipal Officials, Board Director for the City Trust, Board Director for the Philadelphia Cultural Fund, Board Director for the Philadelphia Convention and Visitor Bureau, and Regional Director for the National Black Caucus of local elected officials. So as you can notice, definitely a theme with leadership here with Councilmember Green. Additionally, Councilmember Green's legal experience includes positions as an Assistant District Attorney in Philadelphia and Assistant Deputy Attorney General for the state of Delaware. Councilmember Green is admitted to practice law in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and state of New Jersey. Before becoming an attorney, he was a consumer and small business lender for Meridian Bank. He is also a graduate of the University of Virginia and Temple University School of Law. And Councilmember Green and his wife Sheila co-founded the first autism support class at Houston Elementary School to help other autistic children like their son. To aid other family members affected by autism, they are a top regional fundraiser for Autism Speaks. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to President and CEO Andrea Custis, who will briefly introduce the organization and begin this important conversation. Andrea, the floor is yours.
Thomas, thank you so much for all the work that you continually do in making sure that our community is informed. So thank you very much for all of your work. Many of you know the Urban League, but for those of you who do not, we are a 104-year-old civil rights organization. Our mission is economic empowerment and also social justice. So we speak up and speak out on those issues that impact the African-American communities and others who are underserved. And we are absolutely about lifting our community out of power. And you do that through a number of ways. You do that through education. You do it through purchasing a home, becoming a small business owner, also jobs, employment, career. I can't emphasize that enough. We also are very engaged in health and wellness and have been right at the forefront in making sure that people are tested and that they get the vaccine. I am so thrilled and excited to have Councilmember Derek Green join me today that we can discuss the mayor's proposed budget and what is the impact on the city, and in particular, what is the impact on the African-American community. So I am so excited. I just came out of a committee meeting where I was testifying. So I have committee on my mind, and I had an opportunity, Derek, this week. I think I saw you when I was able to testify on public safety and gun violence. So first of all, I want to thank Councilmember Green for his leadership and his work across the board. But there are two areas in particular that I really would like to talk about, Councilmember Green. And the two areas are business investment and also workforce development. I read the mayor's speech where he singled you out for your work in both of these areas. Your leadership has been consistent and you have had major accomplishments. So let's talk about business investments. And we at the Urban League have a particular interest in that because we've had an entrepreneurship center for almost 15 years. And this year we had an opportunity to really help small business get the PPP loans, and all of them were forgiven. I don't have to tell you that you could look to the left and look to the right. We've had lots of African-American owned businesses not be able to pivot and make it. So I'm excited by what some of the work that you've done in business investments. Can you share what that looks like in the mayor's proposed budget?
Well, Andrea, thank you for the opportunity to be with you. I'm actually in summer transit because I'm sure many of the people who are watching this conversation are familiar with the fact that they've announced that the verdict for the Derek Chauvin trial will be coming probably within the next 15, 20 minutes. So I had to change my schedule. I would have been in City Hall to have this conversation, but as a result of some of the steps that the public safety officials want to do, I'm now moving to another location. I should be able to see you visually in a few moments. And also, Thomas, thank you for that bio. Not sure about all those different activities. I guess that's why I don't have as much hair as I used to. But you know, when you talk about you know, the work that I've done historically, really focusing on not just workforce, but more focused on small business development. That goes back to my own career, and to be quite honest, I will consider myself a forever urban leaguer. When I came out of the University of Virginia, and I was a manager trainee with Meridian Bank, and I was getting back into the Philadelphia environment, I was able to go through what was then called the Urban League Leadership Institute that really put me on the path to really getting a better understanding of the city of Philadelphia and all the various organizations and individuals. And then from there, I had a chance to serve on the board of the Urban League from 1998 to, I believe, 2001. And so that opportunity and the leadership I received from the Urban League really helped promote me to be in a much better position to be able to do some of the things I'm doing now. When you look at the mayor's budget, you know, there are some investments there for entrepreneurship, and the Urban League has been very involved in this work since its 104-year history. Some of the people may not be aware that, you know, the Urban League of Philadelphia actually predates the National Urban League when it came out of the Armstrong Association. So there's been a long history of economic development and advancement. And, you know, there are some investments in the budget, but one of my concerns is that we need to be bolder with some of the things that we're trying to do in the city of Philadelphia, especially when it relates to poverty. We are receiving $1.4 billion, that's billion with a B, as a result of President Biden and the Congress's passage of the American Rescue Plan. Those are dollars that will come to the city of Philadelphia, $700 million within the next few weeks. Another $700 million will come next year. But these are dollars that we really should be making an investment. Now, we did have a budget deficit before we received knowledge about having these dollars of $450 million. But even after addressing the deficit, that's still hundreds of millions of dollars that we should be using to really advance entrepreneurship and small businesses in the city of Philadelphia. The mayor did address some of those aspects in the budget, but what we're going to do in council is really push to put more dollars into those areas to help grow more businesses, especially businesses of color in the African American and Latin communities. Because when you think about the fact that 6% of the businesses with employees in the city of Philadelphia are owned by African Americans, although we have a 43% population of African Americans in Philadelphia and 15% land population in the city of Philadelphia, but only 4% of the businesses with employees are owned by people from the Latin diaspora. And that's an issue that we need to address more. I think the mayor did have a good start with the budget, as I said in my comments after the budget proposal, but we need to go more and go deeper. And I think that's something that I see a commitment from my colleagues.
I thank you for sharing that, Councilmember Green. So part of that I also think that you did that will help small Black businesses is did you not work on streamlining? I think one of the complaints that comes out of small Black businesses is so difficult sometimes to deal with the city in terms of like applying. And so did you do some work on the application process? For some reason, I thought you did. Derek, you're on mute, I think. Okay, I think he might be transitioning right now. So let me brag about Councilmember Green, because I heard that he also, so let me back up. When you are a small business owner, time is precious, and also how you go about doing things, right? I remember when I worked for Verizon, and I worked for Verizon for 32 years, one of the complaints at the time came from Black businesses, and they were middle size and large size. And they said, and it wasn't, they were just given a critique. They said, it's so difficult to deal with you. It is so difficult to get business. And we looked at that process and made drastic changes. And as a result of that, there were so many more Black businesses that came through the procurement process that we exceeded all of the expectations that we laid out there for improvement. And so one of the things that I appreciate that Councilmember Green has done is he looked at the process through procurement on how does a small Black business try to get some of the contracts, small contracts, right? I think they're anywhere from 30 to 75,000, somewhere around that. And he streamlined the process to make it easier. So, you know, on behalf of small Black business owners, thank you also for doing that. The other piece that I'm really proud of is when I look at the numbers, there is an investment that's going to go into technical assistance and capacity building for these small businesses. It is rare for a nonprofit or for small businesses to get any kind of capacity funding. So I really want to thank Councilmember Green for the work in streamlining the process and also for the capacity building. If I may, there is, I don't know if this is
have him back on the screen. Sorry, we do have him back on the screen.
Thank you. So Councilmember Green, what is the Entrepreneurship Industry Partnership? Oh, you're on mute. Okay.
Can you hear me now? Okay,
Yeah,
so
very well.
I heard a little bit of that when you were saying regarding the Entrepreneurship Industry Partnership, and could you give me a little more context?
Yeah, I'm not sure. That's unfamiliar to me, so I don't know what that partnership is.
There are definitely some new ideas within the budget.
Okay.
You know, when we had the budget briefing, that part of the budget did not come up. I do have a meeting with our new Commerce Director, Michael Rashid, and I do have some questions and concerns regarding some aspects of the budget. For example, in the budget, they discussed trying to do certification. Now, we took a process some years ago for the city to get out of doing direct certification. So if we're going to be spending money on certifying small businesses, that's a concern. However, I'm also hearing this may be dollars to help nonprofit organizations help to certify business or help others to get contract with the city of Philadelphia, because that's where the focus should be. So that aspect that you talked about could also be a new initiative that we'll learn about. One of the things that's important for the listeners to know is that the budget process works primarily where the mayor provides a budget address, and then we have budget hearings throughout council. And our budget hearing schedule starts on May 3rd. And we'll have the various departments of the city come to our budget hearings, which will be on Microsoft Teams, also will be broadcast on Verizon and also Comcast. And you can also watch them through phlcouncil.com. And it will give us an opportunity as council members to, one, read the testimony of the various department heads, like Mike Rashu in Commerce. So the question you asked about that proposal in the budget, we will be able to ask as members of council. But also, we want to get information from the public. So having conversations like this, and I will put my information in the chat feature, getting the ability to hear from constituents about what are some of the things that they would like to see in the budget. Now, for this year, this is one of the first years I've seen where the mayor's office is going to have a much more participatory budget process, inviting the public to kind of give their perspective in a higher level of engagement than we've had in the past. I think that's a right idea and a good idea going forward. So the initiative that you talked about and some of the other initiatives, we'll be able to ask Commerce Director Rashid during the budget process to get some more details. And that's where the conversation occurs, because we'll say, well, how much dollars are being allocated for this issue or that issue, and why are we not allocating more dollars? And as I said earlier, one of my real concerns is that with this $1.4 billion, how much are we allocating to investments? Because you can give, it goes to that same parable, you can give someone a fish or teach them how to fish, or even better, give them the skills and ability to start a company that does fishing, that can franchise to other fishing companies. That's when you have that real investment. And I just have a very strong concern that once we get to 2026, we'll look back and say, what did we spend that 1.4 billion on? So the initiative that you just talked about, some of the other type of perspectives, will be able to really drill down deeper into those issues. And through the budget process, council will negotiate with the administration and say, no, we want to see more money into economic development initiatives, more money into maybe the Office of Economic Opportunity to help grow more opportunities for businesses in the city of Philadelphia. Maybe have the ability to have those businesses partner with African-American, Latin businesses from outside the city that can take advantage of opportunities inside the city by doing a joint venture with a local business that may not have that same level of expertise. And so those are the things that I think we need to be doing a better job of. How do we really position opportunities for businesses owned by people of color in the city of Philadelphia as we go forward?
Thank you. That's extremely helpful. So you touched on something. I have some other areas, but you touched on something that I think needs some kind of explanation so that you teach us as Philadelphia citizens. So you talked about the 1.4 billion, right, coming out of the federal government. Then I just recently went through Governor Wolf's budget. Really, I thought I did a pretty good job of going through that myself to understand it and asking a couple of other folks very involved. And then you have the mayor's budget. So how do you explain to the everyday citizen what those three pieces look like? And then as you talk about that, one of the things that for me is extremely important is a short-term view versus a long-term view. Like when you look at this federal money coming in, is that one and done, and then that's it? When you look at the mayor's budget, if you look at the governor's budget, it goes long-term, like 5 years or whatever. So how do you explain like the money coming in and what we're going to do? How do we make sense of all of it?
So let me give it just a kind of an overview of local, state, and federal. So traditionally, our city budget, the mayor will give a budget address generally in the early part of March. And he is required to come to city council, present his budget through a budget address. And that's actually a piece of legislation, is actually a bill that's introduced on his behalf generally by a member of council for the council president, but also for the mayor. And that's what actually starts the budget process. After the mayor's budget address, then we generally, now things have been a little different with the pandemic, but generally 2 to 3 weeks later, we'll start having budget hearings. And the first day of budget hearings, you often have the mayor's office, where you'll have the finance director, maybe the chief of staff, the budget director will give kind of opening testimony and an overview of the entire budget. And then after the first day of budget hearings, then we'll have subsequent days of budget hearings. Generally, those budget hearings will go either Monday or Tuesday of a week. We have council sessions on Thursday, so sometimes it's Tuesday, Wednesday, and then council session on Thursday. And that will go on for a number of weeks. Generally, I would say 6 to 8 weeks in general. And what happens is that each day we have budget hearings. Normally we start in the morning, a break in the afternoon, and then an afternoon session. And each department will come and present their budget testimony with a written testimony, and they'll basically read and present their testimony, which is an overview. And you'll have the police commissioner. She will give her testimony from the law department, the city solicitor, all the various departments of the city. In addition, while independent elected officials also present their budget testimony. Now, the administration doesn't have the ability to have oversight independent elected officials, although they will still participate in the budget process, and they will submit their information as part of their budget testimony. But council, as the legislative body, ultimately has the oversight to pass the budget. And so what will happen is council will make amendments or changes to what the mayor initially presented, and then that gets passed. And we as a legislative body under our home rule charter have to pass that by the time a new fiscal year starts, which is July 1. When people talk about the budget, generally they're talking about the general fund budget. The general fund are the dollars that come into the city of Philadelphia from our wage taxes, our real estate taxes, business income receipt taxes, fees, amusement tax, sales tax. Those are the dollars that come into the budget. So when people generally talking about the budget from the city of Philadelphia perspective, they're talking about the general fund budget, which generally has been about $5.2 billion. But part of that budget also will include dollars that we will receive from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, like, for example, grants. So when you look at the fact that the city of Philadelphia is both a city and a county, the only city and county in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we receive dollars from the Commonwealth, just like Montgomery County, Chester, and Bucks County would receive for certain programs like health and human services. So behavioral health, those type of dollars that will come to the city of Philadelphia by way of a grant from the Commonwealth. Now, those dollars tend to be about $2.5 billion, give or take. And that comes from the budget process from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Now, the governor generally presents the budget address early part of February. And so just like the budget hearings that we had, the city council, they have the same process in Harrisburg. The difference, though, you have a general assembly that's bicameral. So you have a House of Representatives and a state Senate. So both legislative bodies will have budget hearings, just like we have budget hearings in city council. And then just like the governor presents his budget address by way of legislation to the General Assembly, same thing has happened that I described earlier, which is what happened with the mayor and city council. Now, the state budget generally has been roughly about $30 to $32 billion, give or take, based on some of the dynamics that will occur in Harrisburg. And just like that give and take of a negotiation between city council and mayor, the same thing happens between the General Assembly and the governor, which is the chief executive for the Commonwealth. Now, the federal level, things are a little bit different because both the city of Philadelphia and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has a fiscal year that goes from July 1 to June. At the federal level, it's a different fiscal year, which goes from October 1 to September. So their process is a little bit different from a budgetary standpoint, also because of some of the, I'll just say, dynamics between the chief executive at the federal level being the president and the Congress, which includes the House and Senate. they have not been able to pass budgets in a traditional sense for some time. And so they've done what's called continuing resolutions, which is what has kept the government open. So when you've heard in the past about the federal government running out of money or the federal government closing, that's because did not pass a continuing resolution to keep the government open. Now, in years past, they were able to pass budgets at the federal level. We will see what happens this year. And when I was talking earlier about how the American Rescue Plan was passed, which is bringing $1.4 billion to the city of Philadelphia and cities around the nation. Now, through my work at the National Cities, you're going to see about 19,000 cities that have never received kind of federal dollars, like community development block grant dollars like we get here in Philadelphia. They're going to be getting those dollars for the first time. So that's going to be very revolutionary for those cities. But also you're now probably hearing about this American Jobs Plan, which is President Biden's infrastructure bill, which is an opportunity for cities like Philadelphia, Chicago, New York to look at infrastructure opportunities that we really have not invested in for so long. For any of you who are drive in or used to drive in before the pandemic, and you go through West River Drive, and there's a certain bridge that you see the water coming through the bridge and through the rebar. Those are some of the infrastructure investments that we have not been making in the city, and I would say around not only the Commonwealth, but around the nation. And so those are the three areas that we deal with. And just like I talked about the dollars we're receiving through the American Rescue Plan that was passed through reconciliation, which is coming to Philadelphia, which will allow us to get out of the budget deficit that we'll have as we're going through our budget process. And then also at the state level, the Commonwealth is also going to receive money out of the American Rescue Plan. So those three process from a budget perspective impact us here in the city of Philadelphia.
That is probably the best explanation, and I really mean this, that I have ever heard of merging and bringing together and understanding the city process, the state process, and the federal process. So I'm going to ask you a favor now. Here I go. Nothing's free. I'm going to ask you to come back this summer virtually for me. I have 50 Cheney students, and on Friday, I will always be doing, they'll be working for profit and not for profit. But on Friday, I want it to be a leadership and development day. So I'm going to ask you now in front of everybody, will you come back and present some information on the budget so that these young Black students get it? And then also if you could put that together with a little bit about what is the function of city council? What do they do? What do they do up there as state senators and representatives? And then can we talk about what they do in Congress and what they do in the Senate up on the Hill? If you could do that, can I get a promise that you'll come back?
You have me both on Zoom and Facebook Live, so I will do that. It's not a problem. And I think it goes back to civics. That's something that we have lost. For some of those who are on this call may remember how we learned about legislation. I know I learned about it through Schoolhouse Rock, although I'm a little more seasoned, some will say a seasoned millennial. But I learned that through Schoolhouse Rock, and I'm just a bill. And those type of jingles really help us. I know for me personally,
I remember them.
Get an understanding of how a bill works. I'm just a bill sitting on Capitol Hill. Now I'm not gonna sing the jingle but you understand the perspective. But that really was my first real introduction to the legislative process.
I want to move to just a little bit. Any comments from you on what the mayor has put in for workforce, the importance of it, or any comments you want to make on workforce development?
Well, last year we had a very challenging budget. We had a $750 million deficit. And so we had to close that deficit and we had to make some significant cuts. Now, one of the concerns that a number of people raised, and this gives a little bit of the give and take executive and legislative branch. A number of members of council did not like or were really disappointed that the mayor decided to close the mayor's office of workforce, which is an office of the mayor to help address these initiatives. And we talked earlier about the interconnection between poverty public safety, education, homelessness. These are all interconnected. And the fact that we were going to end and close out an Office of Workforce Development was something that was really concerning. And so going back to that dynamic of executive or / legislative branch, we as a council could have put the money back into the budget for that office, but it's a mayor's office. So as mayor, he can decide that, well, council, you can put that money in, but I've closed the office. And so the people that would have been in office are no longer there and they can't spend that money. So I'm glad that the mayor is bringing back dollars into the budget this year for workforce opportunities. I know there's a number of initiatives that I've been involved in with the Greater Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce. There are organizations that are working with the Philadelphia Forward Skills Initiative to really, and that's an initiative, I believe, with Graduate Philadelphia and the Chamber of Commerce and Urban Affairs Coalition and others to try to help provide skills for people that have been displaced because of the pandemic and try to retrain people. And they're working with Accenture and looking about trying to give 5,000 people an opportunity that may have had a skill set in, say, hospitality. And we saw what happened to our hospitality industry because of the pandemic. We couldn't go to restaurants, couldn't go to hotels. So that industry, which is a very significant core of our economy in Philadelphia, was lost. Not just Philadelphia, but the region was lost. And so they're trying to help people with those skills in that industry transfer those skills into other job opportunities, where having that background in hospitality is going to be very advantageous to some of these other opportunities where you have employers that have openings but can't find people for those positions. And so that's an initiative. I think the work coming out of the funding for workforce is important, but we've got to do a lot more. And that's why, I said in response to the mayor's budget, we've got to go bolder. We've got to do things in a different way because, we're going to see the outcome of the Derek Chauvin trial, this afternoon. But there are so many other issues from a systemic perspective regarding public safety. And I said, economic development, entrepreneurship, they all tie in. And when people look at the city, they don't say, well, that's something the city council did. That's what some of the mayor did or department. We're all the city. And so that's why we've got to really think critically, how are we using these dollars going forward to really benefit our city? Because we're not going to see a $1.4 billion initiative of new money coming from the federal government. I've never seen that in my lifetime.
Right.
And I can't recall going back to past budgets over the years and just knowing Philadelphia's history that we've seen that type of infusion of new money that has to be spent by 2024.
Right. Councilmember Green, I can't emphasize enough about the workforce development piece. I don't know how you bring people out of poverty unless they have an opportunity to have a family sustaining wage and how they get to have a career, employment. I've not met anybody. I'm in the office here today. I'm here every day. I've not met anyone that has come through these doors that does not want a job. I've not met anyone who does not want to take care of their family, their children. All they want is an opportunity. It's not a handout. They want an opportunity to have employment. And coming out of a technical background, one of the things that I definitely came in here with gung-ho was to introduce really more technology when it comes to jobs. And so I was able to get funding from several sources, Comcast being consistently there for funding for me to have a Urban Tech, which is an IT certification program. And then I was able to get Google to match that so that we could have a bigger impact, and was able to get the National Urban League. So we have absolutely been able to make a difference in that particular other spaces, but we have really knocked it out the park for individuals who never thought that they would be able to be certified in an IT job. So we will continue to work every day to lift people out of poverty by giving them gainful employment and to respect the wages also. I mean, we have got to fight for $15 an hour. This $7.25 minimum wage, and even when I look at my peers, there's 89 other peers, no one has a minimum rate like that. And when I look at individuals going in, like a single mother with 2 children, how can she live off of $9 an hour or $10 an hour? And that's why you see many folks that are doing second jobs in order to maintain what
Right.
they need for like rent and affordable housing.
And that's very good point. I mean, we as a city have been losing jobs for a long period of time. It's only been in the recent years prior to the pandemic where we've actually started to grow jobs. But
Mhm.
unfortunately, a good number of those jobs are in industries that are in what some would say are the lower wage jobs, where people are not able to advance but up to a certain level. And you even have, unfortunately, some of the young people who've gotten involved in some of our um, drug activity are people that are maybe working in a part-time job, but they need additional money to put food on the table for their children. And so they are not looking at this as a career. Now, you do have some that are definitely
Mhm.
made a decision, I'm going to live that life. But
Mhm.
you also have others who have not been exposed to other opportunities, and they only see this as a means of how they're going to put food on their table. And that's a real challenge. And I think we have to provide more opportunities for young people to get exposed to those abilities. If we think about, during the 70s or maybe in the early 80s, if you went to a high school here in the city of Philadelphia, um, when you left high school, if you want to get a job at maybe the bud plant, or you want to get a job at some other location, you have those opportunities
Mhm.
without necessarily having a college degree, but we're
Right.
able to get a job and then grow in that job to be able to buy a home in a part of the city and then help provide for your family. And those
Mhm.
opportunities are not there like they used to be. And we
Right.
have to provide those opportunities for any of the people on the call on Facebook had the opportunity to see Concrete Cowboy. And I talked about this last week in City Council. There was a character in that movie, and it was a great father-son dynamic, but it was a character in that movie by the name of Smush. And he was someone that had a relationship with the young man in the movie who was our son. And they knew each other young, and then, son went away and then came back to Philly. And, he was involved in the drug game, and he
Mhm.
was selling drugs and, but that wasn't the whole story on his character. We also learned that he had a vision. He had a vision that I'm only going to sell drugs for a period of time. And I'm going to save this money. And I was saving the money. He was saving the money in his home in order to get into real estate. And he had a very detailed proposal and concept of what he was going to do and buy homes and renovate them. And then he was going to buy land, outside of the region. But also we learned that he was also involved in the Fletcher Street cowboy culture. And if I remember correctly, the horse that was in Idris Elba's house was Smush's horse. So at one point, he was very engaged in all the positive activity, but then at some point he veered to the criminal activity because I think he only saw that as a way of bringing food in his house in order to create that seed capital for his vision of a legitimate entrepreneurial enterprise.
Mhm.
So I think he is probably an example of other young people in the city of Philadelphia that have only been exposed to certain perspectives and only believe the way to be able to create that seed capital that we talk about in business and entrepreneurship was by getting involved in drug activity. And unfortunately, in the movie, Smush was fallen due to gun violence. And I think when you see about the 499 homicides in Philadelphia, I would venture that a number of young people have fell to gun violence because of similar perspectives as this character in Concrete Cowboy.
Councilmember Derek Green, you just said that in such a very accurate, clear way. We have a reentry program, and we have had such success in recruiting. and doing a 4-week intensive program. And right now we're at a 90% rate in placing all of our individuals, they're predominantly Black males, in positions. And these are not low-level positions. We've been able to get them the money, like those that have gone through CDL training, which is the big truck driving. Those individuals can make between $70,000 and $80,000 a year, and we're so proud of that. One of the areas that I looked at as I look at the budget, I see 35.5 million into the anti-violent efforts. And it's one that for me as an advocate, a civil rights leader, and more importantly, as a mother, that devastates me. And every time I get a signal on my phone, I just feel like someone is injured or dying unnecessarily so. And I think your editorial on that is so accurate. And how do I know? Because I've talked to these individuals. And I know for the majority of people, it's a tough story to hear. And they might say, so what? It's not a so what. I have an individual that's currently in the cohort, and it was his son that was killed in Alney, 26 shots that he was killed. He did something, that even his mother and father see that, probably bad decision. Good kid. And when I look at, there's a group called 17 with Life, and I've met them out in the park and we all talked. And I said, what happened in your life that made you do it? They said exactly what you said, exactly. Every time I go to a rally, these individuals all said to me that we were 17 years old. And they said, my mother was out on the street doing things she shouldn't have been doing. She was a drug addict. My father was in prison and I had nobody. And for them, the person that came to their rescue was the drug dealer that said, here's your corner, here's your gun. And unfortunately, those that had 17 with Life, but they were let out because the laws changed. But they said that was the only person who came to my rescue. There was not a Derek Green. There was not an Urban League of Philadelphia. There was nobody that said, let me bring you in. I might need to even shake you, or also educate you and tell you that you could do better. And the stories are the same, one after another, one after another. And it's exactly what you said. So we have got to get underneath that and have mentors and have programs that are from the people in the community that know how to do it. Our community knows what they need. They've asked for recreation centers. They've asked for mentors. They've asked for programs where kids can make t-shirts and sell them. They know what they want. And so I am optimistic and hopeful that this proposed budget will absolutely allow for that.
Right.
But your story is spot on.
And one of the concerns, and I'll reiterate again why I felt that the mayor needs to be bolder with his budget, and I think council is going to take actions to make it a bolder budget, is that the administration talked about targeted community grants, community engagement grants, community investment grants in the budget, but we didn't see a specific dollar allocated to that. There are a number of organizations that have done grassroots community engagement, violence disruptors or interrupters, however you want to phrase them, that have been engaged in this type of work for some time. The group you just talked about are probably individuals that have had experiences in their life, are returning citizens, and now are trying to do things in a different way and give their own experiences to the next generation. So as we're looking at this $1.4 billion budget, and we should be looking at why are we not providing more dollars to those grassroots community-based organizations, many who are running their organizations with a few dedicated volunteers, running out of someone's house or some location with limited resources, and really can't do the multitudinal impact to more young people around the city because they're basically robbing Peter to pay Paul just to keep the lights on. So that's why I'm saying that bolder investment. When we see we have such a challenge in public safety, let's bring into the opportunity, some of the people who are doing this work pro bono, because they see there's a need in the city, and there's a need that impacts all of us. And that's not just someone that lives in a certain part of the city. That's the entire city of Philadelphia, from the Greater Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce to University of Pennsylvania to Temple to Drexel to LaSalle, entrepreneur that's in Rittenhouse Square to Washington Lane to Washington Avenue to Broad and Diamond, to Bridesburg to King Sessing, to Holmesburg to Mayfair, to Germantown. This impacts all of us. And I
Right,
think too often people have the perspective, well, this doesn't impact me because I live in a
right.
certain sector of the city. This doesn't impact me because that happens over there. It's not going to spill over into my neighborhood. Well, it
Yes.
impacts the entire city of Philadelphia. If you're the CEO of a corporation that
Mhm.
is, in the city of Philadelphia, and you're trying to grow, it's going to be hard to do that when so much of our dollars from a budget perspective are going to just public safety issues, some of the education issues and challenges, all of these dynamics. So we all have to play a role. And I think that's something that I hope going
Mhm.
forward, people take more ownership that, I, as a member of city council, need to do a better job on doing the work that I do and need to do to try to help address all of these issues. But we all have to play a role, and we can't just say, well, this is their problem when it's our problem. And
Right.
we all need to take our ownership of that. And one of the ways we take that ownership is letting people know what they would like to see in the budget. And from my perspective, getting those dollars to those grassroots community-based organizations who are doing the work. And we've had a history of doing this before. I mean, back in the 70s, we had no gang war in 74. We've had
Yeah.
the people doing it at the community-based level for a
Yeah.
long period of time. We've had ups and downs of violence, especially the gun violence that we're seeing in our city. And so
Mhm.
we have done this in the past. I think we can do it going forward, but we've got to give those resources to the organizations that really need it and are doing the work to address this issue.
So agree. Well said. I just want to do a couple of things. You're getting a lot of thank you for explaining that, Council Member Green, from Bruce Hill, when you went through the federal government, the state and the city. There's another question I might have to get back to Mitchell, and he says that it takes too long for in the city to get paid as a small business. Usually it takes 90 days or more. And they said that cuts into a profit that you can. And he wants to know whether or not there are any investments in the budget to help quicken the payment process. I'm not aware. I don't know, but I can certainly, Thomas, we can follow up and find out if there's
And and
anything.
and to really follow up on that point, council has passed legislation to make it quicker, but those are things that we should be investing in the budget. And in
Okay.
reference to how do we help small businesses? If we can put dollars into the budget to make it easier for the processing of transition, because time is money. And if I'm an
Yes.
entrepreneur,
Yes.
and I'm going from contract to contract, and I'm waiting 90, 120 days to get paid,
Yes.
those are times that I don't have those resources for work that I did and money I've got to pay out to my employees that are going to restrict my ability to continue to grow.
Absolutely. I just want to ask another how you feel about what the education budget looks like. This, I see 1.38 billion in funding for a 5-year plan for the school district, 250 million for Community College of Philadelphia, and just wanted to know your thoughts on education and the investment that city council should be voting on and what we should be supporting when it comes
Mhm.
to education in the city of Philadelphia. I'll just make one or two comments on that. Um, it is shameful to me as a state that we are still having a conversation about the fair funding formula. It is um, it is horrendous to me to see that in the city of Philadelphia, I might get $10,000 per student, but if I move to Lower Marion, I get 20,000 per student. So just give me your views or where you are on education and your responsibility as a member of city council.
Well, I will say one of the areas that the mayor really made some investments is in education. When you talked about the dollars allocated to the school district of Philadelphia, the school district receives their money based on, local real estate taxes and also funding from the Commonwealth. And so the mayor is talking about making an investment even more on top of that for the school district. And I think that's going to be something that's going to be beneficial going forward. When the mayor came into office, he proposed his universal pre-K initiative. He more recently, in the beginning of his second term, he proposed the Octavius Vount and Cato Scholarship as a way to provide opportunities for young people to be able to go into the Community College of Philadelphia. And so he's putting them dollars back into that initiative out of the dollars we are receiving from the American Rescue Plan. So that is an investment in the future of our city in reference to our children. But when you make reference to the point that you stated about $10,000, give or take, coming per pupil from the Commonwealth, to the city of Philadelphia for education spending. Now, part of that is part of the systemic issues and challenges of our country. When you think about concepts like redlining, and I'm reflecting on when Thomas was reading my bio, and I'm going back to my times when I was a small business lender for Meridian Bank, and you had certain areas of this city where you would not be able to get a loan. And then that caused disinvestment over time. And then you flash forward years later, and this happened after I left banking, that you were seeing people having, those who were even able to create equity in their home, have equity stripped out of their home through issues like predatory lending. So when you have that type of wide scale perspective that does not allow people to grow equity in their home, that impacts not only their ability to start a business and do other ventures, but also impacts the funding for education, because real estate taxes is the local investment for education. So when you make that comparison between Lower Merion and the school and the city of Philadelphia, well, that's because the value of properties in the city of Philadelphia from a macro level doesn't have the same level of value, because you have neighborhoods in our city that have historically and obviously systemically been undervalued because of redlining. So you're not going to have the same amount of money coming into the school district at the local level. Now that's about half of the funding. The other half comes from the Commonwealth. Now in our state constitution, I believe it's Article 3, Section 14, it says it's the responsibility of the General Assembly, so that's the State House and State Senate, to provide a fair and thorough system of education for the benefit of the constituents of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So generally, the General Assembly is supposed to be providing enough money to make sure that the constituents in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania have adequate educational funding. Most other states in the nation that have that same language in their state constitution have a much higher threshold of dollars that they are receiving from their General Assembly. For whatever reason, our General Assembly has not taken upon that perspective. And what's happened is at the local level, the share of money that's had to be raised to meet education standards has been going up. So outside of Philadelphia, you have various school districts who have been raising property taxes because the state level funding has been flat, but the need's been greater, and so they've been raising property taxes. And then here in Philadelphia, we've had to find other ways to provide additional funding for our schools, and that's also created that challenge. Now there has been and there is current litigation against the Pennsylvania Department of Education. There's a William Penn School District et al. And the City of School District that was part of that litigation that's in front of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, that they will be having argument in the fall. And hopefully that outcome of that litigation will have the court system, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, to then say and order the General Assembly, you need to provide additional funding for school district around the Commonwealth that's adequate. And you have to provide more funding, because it's not just a Philadelphia issue.
No, it's across the state. Absolutely.
It's across the state. And as president of the Pennsylvania Municipal League, I talk to my colleagues who are mayors and council members in other jurisdictions, and they're having the same issue where they have to raise taxes and
Yep.
augment the money that we're not receiving at the state level. And so this is something that's important, not just for people in Philadelphia, but people in Reading, Norristown, Erie, Williamsport, Scranton, Lancaster, Harrisburg, all around the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And so this fair funding initiative is an issue that we have to continue to press on. I hope the litigation comes out the right way, but also as a reminder that elections have consequences. So we have a Pennsylvania Supreme Court that's majority Democrat versus Republican that gives us a better outcome. So when we go to the polls in November, and I know this is nonpartisan, but voting has impact. And when you vote, it has an impact on what's going to happen going forward. And I think the Pennsylvania Supreme Court case in reference to the fair funding litigation is an excellent example of what could be the outcome of voting your interests.
I think you just wrapped it up and said the entire thing. Thomas and I have stayed so close to the litigation. We are part of making sure we educate people, part of making sure that we're nonpartisan, working across the aisle on that. I think what you just said is a big reminder, not just general elections. Pay attention to the elections in your cities, in your states, because these are the judges you have. These are the representatives you have. They are critical as general elections. So we have to be educated. Thomas and I have some work to do to make sure people get to the polls. Usually it's a poor turnout. The piece that you just said on education, the whole fair funding formula impacts rural America, suburban America. As you said, McKeesport, Lancaster, Philadelphia, William Penn, all around. So let me just say this. I want to be conscious of people's time. It's 5:02. Usually I end right at 5. I don't even know how to say thank you to you, Councilmember Derek Green. You are amazing. While you're talking, I'm like, why isn't he a professor in a major university doing something? I've just gone 3 or 4 different ways. I just really want to say thank you, first of all, for caring so much about our communities. Thank you for staying vigilant and focused and targeted on doing the right thing for the city. It's never about you. It's never about you. It is always about this city. Thank you for loving this city, and thank you for your amazing leadership. And I mean that from the heart and from the Urban League of Philadelphia.
Well, I definitely appreciate the opportunity to have the conversation and look forward to talking with the Cheney students. I'm sure they'll be very articulate in saying that they are the first historically Black college university in the nation. I'm sure there are Lincoln grads who would differ with that perspective. So you may have to get a group of Lincoln students. Maybe you can have a Lincoln Cheney debate within the confines of the Urban League. But I think it's important. I always relish the opportunity to support the work at Urban League in Philadelphia. And it's something that the work that the Urban League has done going back to the Armstrong Association to now, this demonstrates the need and importance for these conversations to help educate people in the city of Philadelphia, but more importantly, people of color and especially African Americans. So I will always be here to support the great work that the Urban League of Philadelphia is doing. And I thank you for the opportunity and look forward to ongoing conversations on how we can move our city forward.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Everyone
No
stay
problem.
safe. Thomas, thank you so much. Good
Not a
night.
problem. We want to thank everyone for joining us. Follow us on social media, find all the different events that we have planned. To the point regarding Education Summit this Saturday, we'll be talking about the need to empower parents to fight for more school funding. All that information will be on our Facebook page, along with an upcoming event where we will be looking at the impact of federal and state legislation on the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So when we look at Biden's rescue plan, along with Governor Wolf's proposed budget, what does that look like? And more importantly, how do we as African Americans leverage these bills that are coming out of our government to support our community? So May 4th at 4:45 p.m. is our next event. The link is in the chat and in the Facebook feed. We look forward to having you join us. Thanks once again, Councilmember Green. Thank you for joining us this evening, and everyone enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Take care.